This world is empty to him alone who does not understand how to direct his libido toward objects, and to render them alive and beautiful for himself. For beauty does not indeed lie in things, but in the feeling that we give to them. That which compels us to create a substitute for ourselves is not the external lack of objects, but our incapacity to lovingly include a thing outside of ourselves. Certainly the difficulties of the conditions of life and the adversities of the struggle for existence may oppress us, yet even adverse external situations would not hinder the giving out of the libido. On the contrary, they may spur us on to the greatest exertions, whereby we bring our whole libido into reality. Real difficulties alone will never be able to force the libido back permanently to such a degree as to give rise, for example, to a neurosis. The conflict, which is the condition of every neurosis, is lacking. The resistance, which opposes its unwillingness to the will, alone has the power to produce that pathogenic introversion which is the starting point of every psychogenic disturbance. The resistance against loving produces the inability to love. Just as the normal libido is comparable to a steady stream which pours its waters broadly into the world of reality, so the resistance, dynamically considered, is comparable, not so much to a rock rearing up in the riverbed which is flooded over or surrounded by the stream, as to a backward flow towards the source. A part of the soul desires the outer object, another part, however, harks back to the subjective world, where the airy and fragile palaces of fantasy beckon. One can assume the dualism of the human will, for which Bleuler, from the psychiatric point of view, has coined the word ambitendency as something generally present, bearing in mind that even the most primitive motor impulse is in opposition, as, for example, in the act of extension, the flexor muscles also become innervated. This normal ambitendency, however, never leads to an inhibition or prevention of the intended act, but is the indispensable preliminary requirement for its perfection and coordination. For a resistance disturbing to this act to arise from this harmony of finely attuned opposition, an abnormal plus or minus would be needed on one or the other side. The resistance originates from this added third. This applies also to the duality of the will, from which so many difficulties arise for mankind. The abnormal third frees the pair of opposites, which normally are most intimately united, and causes their manifestation in the form of separate tendencies. It is only thus that they become willingness and unwillingness, which interfere with each other. The Bhagavad Gita says, "Be thou free of the pairs of opposites." The harmony thus becomes disharmony. It cannot be my task here to investigate whence the unknown third arises and what it is. Taken at the roots in the case of our patients, the nuclear complex, Freud, reveals itself as the incest problem. The sexual libido regressing to the parents appears as the incest tendency. The reason this path is so easily travelled is due to the enormous indolence of mankind, which will relinquish no object of the past, but will hold it fast forever. The sacrilegious backward grasp of which Nietzsche speaks reveals itself, stripped of its incest covering, as an original passive arrest of the libido in its first object of childhood. This indulgence is also a passion, as La Rochefoucauld has brilliantly expressed it. Of all passions, that which is least known to ourselves is indolence. It is the most ardent and malignant of them all, although its violence may be insensible, and the injuries it causes may be hidden. If we will consider its power attentively, we will see that it makes itself upon all occasions mistress of our sentiments, of our interests, and of our pleasures. It is the anchor which has the power to arrest the largest vessels. It is a calm more dangerous to the most important affairs than rocks and the worst tempest. The repose of indolence is a secret charm of the soul, which suddenly stops the most ardent pursuits and the firmest resolutions. Finally, to give the true idea of this passion, one must say that indolence is like a beatitude of the soul which consoles it for all its losses and takes the place of all its possessions. This dangerous passion, belonging above all others to primitive man, appears under the hazardous mask of the incest symbol, from which the incest fear must drive us away, and which must be conquered in the first place under the image of the terrible mother.